Peppa and George carefully descended the stairs. They saw their parents, wounded and bitten, with dark green skin and spots all over their faces. They were surrounded by zombies. Mummy Pig weakly muttered.
Help! We couldn't escape.
Daddy Pig shouted with his last strength.
Run quickly!
The house filled with zombie pigs. It seemed there was no way out. Peppa remembered that there was a basement in the house. She quickly grabbed Evie, took George's hand, and they locked themselves inside, trying to catch their breath and calm down. The basement was dark and frightening. They pushed through cobwebs. From above, they could hear crashes and screams. They stayed there for several hours, passing the time by rummaging through old things out of boredom. Suddenly, George found a cassette labeled, "The Time Has Come." They found an old player and turned it on. They heard their grandfather's voice.
My little pigs, if you're listening to this recording, it means they've found you. The fate of our city is in your hands. In the basement was a secret laboratory. Press 3 palms against the wall. A control panel will open. The entry code is 7221. In my lab notebook, find recipe number 666. Only it can cure all those infected.
Peppa exclaimed.
That's the recipe! We need to mix these ingredients.
They set to work, and even the process seemed fun to them. After several hours, the potion was ready. Peppa poured the vaccine into bottles and distributed it to all the infected. Gradually, everyone began to revive. The spots disappeared, and their skin color returned to normal. The city thanked its saviors. The Peppa family decided to celebrate this day. They sat in the kitchen with a cake and tea. But suddenly, a familiar roar was heard. Deleted Peppa Pig episode, The Living Toy. George loved his dinosaur, but that day, the toy fell into a place where it shouldn't have gone. George didn't know. Some toys find their owners on their own. When George disappeared, Peppa decided to look for him, but she had no idea. She would have to search not for her brother, but for what had taken him. The trail led to the nursery, where it all began. The door to the nursery swung open, and Peppa saw a giant dinosaur holding George in its claws.
Give him back!
Peppa shouted, but the dinosaur already knew his name. Peppa tried to rescue her brother, but the dinosaur swatted her away with its tail. George mumbled. His voice sounded strange, as if the dinosaur was learning how to be him. Peppa grabbed a toy hammer and struck the dinosaur's paw. It dropped George.
Run!
Peppa yelled, but George didn't move. His eyes turned red. In the morning, George returned, but Peppa saw that now the dinosaur was always watching him. At night, a voice was heard behind the door.
The little dinosaur. Mine.
He waiting, because children can be lost so easily, especially when they think they've been found. It was an ordinary day.
Wow!
Grandpa brought the family an old television. It looked strange, but it immediately turned on. It was showing memories, happy and familiar. But sometimes there was something extra in these scenes. At night, Peppa woke up to a strange crackling sound. The TV turned on by itself. It showed Mom, but with eyes that looked empty, erased, just for a second. In the morning, the scene repeated, only Peppa noticed. During the day, everything seemed normal. No one believed Peppa's stories. A little later, she saw Daddy Pig. He wasn't blinking. He was just staring.
See, Daddy, you see? Something's wrong.
Daddy Pig monotonously replied, "We've all been here before." Peppa searched for an explanation. With each day, everything in the house became stranger. Peppa whispered,
Mom?
She answered emotionlessly.
Don't look for too long, Peppa. You'll see too much.
Daddy disappeared. The screen hummed as if it knew this would happen. Peppa decided to act. She pulled at the TV cord, but it sank into the floor and disappeared. The TV had never been plugged in, never before. Now it showed only fear and nothing else. On the screen, family members without faces, Peppa inside it. She screamed but made no sound. Peppa tore off George's toy hammer and struck the TV. The screen cracked. From inside, thick black liquid flowed out. Something unpleasant and dark seeped outward. The TV was gone, but distorted reflections remained. Some things don't turn off, even if the screen is no longer there. Peppa finds an old, dusty toy box in the attic. Inside is a large doll with a porcelain face, but it doesn't have a face, just a smooth white oval. "What a strange doll," says Peppa, looking at her. George looks at the doll with apprehension and hides behind his mother. At night, it seems to Peppa that the doll is looking at her. She hears quiet whispers from her room, even though no one is there. The next morning, the doll is in a different place. Peppa tries to get rid of the doll, but it always comes back. One day, while playing with George, Peppa draws the doll's face with a marker pen. At first, it's funny, but at night, the face on the doll changes. Now it's an evil grimace with sharp teeth and glowing red eyes. Peppa is terrified. She realizes that the doll is alive and something bad is happening. She runs to Mama Piggy, but she doesn't believe her. At night, Peppa wakes up from the cold. She sees a doll by her bed. The doll stretches its porcelain hand towards her. Peppa screams, but no one comes. In the morning, Peppa disappears. George is playing alone in the garden, but he is no longer grunting with joy. He holds a faceless doll in his hands. Piggy's mom and dad are standing at the window, their faces full of despair. Their voices are barely audible. "Where is our Peppa?" Bright sunny day, the entire Peppa family was on their way to visit Grandma and Grandpa.
I can't wait to see Grandma and Grandpa,
said Peppa.
Dinosaur! Grrr.
Exclaimed George. They enjoyed a cozy time together, baking cookies. Peppa and George exchanged mischievous smiles.
Let's explore the basement,
suggested Peppa. They tiptoed down the creaky stairs into the dimly lit basement. In the corner stood a dusty chest covered in cobwebs.
What is that? A treasure chest?
Peppa asked in surprise. She opened it with a loud creak. Suddenly, dark shadows burst out from inside, forming sinister figures. "Peppa, I'm scared," George said fearfully. At that moment, everything in the kitchen was peaceful and calm. The family was drinking tea when, suddenly, the children's screams prompted the parents to go downstairs.
What's going on, kids?
Asked Mummy Pig. The shadows swirled around the parents, trying to pull them into the chest. Daddy Pig grabbed one of the tentacles that was emerging from the chest.
"George, Peppa, back away!"
Daddy Pig shouted sternly. But suddenly, one of the shadows struck him, causing him to lose his balance and loosen his grip. The shadows swallowed the parents. Grandma and Grandpa were having a lovely chat in the kitchen, but Grandpa noticed that no one had come back from the basement for a long time and decided to check. Grandpa Pig hurried down the stairs with a serious look on his face.
Inside this chest were the souls of those brave enough to open it. I found this on an old ship,
he said grimly.
It's a curse.
He pulled out an old book from his pocket and began to recite a spell. The shadows taunted Grandpa, whispering incomprehensible words, and he looked frightened.
Grandpa, help us!
Peppa cried out. The shadows started to dissolve, but suddenly George snatched the book from Grandpa's hands and threw it onto the floor. His eyes turned red as if he were under hypnosis. "No more light needed," he declared. The remaining shadows lunged at Grandpa, dragging him into the chest. He struggled but was helpless. Peppa watched in horror as George advanced toward her with tears in her eyes.
What are you doing?
She shouted in fear. With tears streaming down her face, she grabbed the tattered book tightly and held it high.
I won't let you take my family.
She declared to the shadows, her voice trembling but resolute. She recited something she remembered from Grandpa's stories. The shadows screamed and began to vanish. Silence fell over the basement. Peppa and George were left alone, trembling with horror as they realized they had lost their family. At that moment, Grandma was enjoying the taste of her tea and listening to pleasant music, but a feeling of unease disturbed her peace. Grandma Pig appeared at the top of the stairs, looking horrified at what was happening. Peppa and George looked at each other, trembling, speechless. From inside the open chest, faint whispers of the shadows still echoed softly. One word. It was an ordinary day. She was sitting in the playroom playing with a ball. Suddenly, it started rolling slowly across the floor by itself. She looked at it in surprise. The ball stopped near the wall, and suddenly a strange rustling sound was heard, like someone whispering behind her back. Peppa turned around. Nobody was there. Suddenly, the toys began to move on their own. Dolls swayed without wind. Cars rolled across the floor without her involvement. Peppa was frightened and looked into the mirror. Her reflection was terrifying. Her eyes darkened and her smile widened more than usual. Suddenly, the toys disappeared. The room grew darker. A shadow appeared in the mirror, rapidly approaching Peppa. She tried to turn away, but the mirror seemed to suck her inside. She didn't notice how she fell into it head first. Peppa found herself in a strange, dark cave. A piercing scream shattered the silence. Turning around, she saw many small, poor piglets who had been trapped there for several years. She realized that escaping on her own and rescuing these little ones was her mission. Illuminating the walls with a flashlight, she saw mysterious symbols resembling a cipher. She struggled for a long time to figure out how to rearrange the elements to form a word. Suddenly, it came to her. She quickly drew the symbols in the correct order and obtained the word love. Suddenly, the walls trembled, stones rained down, and the cave collapsed with a loud crash. The piglets were set free. They found themselves on a bright meadow bathed in sunlight. The little pigs thanked Peppa, and she rejoiced at her new friends. They were celebrating when they didn't notice someone watching them from behind a tree.